set in that regard, insofar as I was successful at doing that. And, the liberal types, they're very sensitive to pathologies of order. And the conservative types are very sensitive to pathologies of chaos. But they're both right. It's just there's no final solution to that problem. You're stuck with it. It's an existential, it's an eternal existential concern. That's why mythological language is standard across people, is no matter who you are, no matter when you live, you always have to deal with the fact that some things escape your competence. And no matter where you are, no matter who you are, you have to adapt to the fact of the existence of a value structure that's shared across a social group. It's the fundamental, so those are fundamental constituent elements of human experience. And we have symbols for them. And we all understand the symbols. So, for example, in Pinocchio, I'm not going to go into this because it's too complicated, but no one balks at a puppet going to the bottom of the ocean and being swallowed by a whale. Why? It makes no sense. There's nothing about that makes sense. Right? It's obviously not an empirical description of the objective world, but it's so clearly real that a 4-year-old can follow it. It's a mystery. The whale breathes fire in Pinocchio. It's a dragon. And why? Why is that? Well, we face dragons forever. That's what a human being is. It's a creature that faces the dragon. The dragon can burn you to a crisp, but it has what you need. That's the world. It'll burn you up, but it has what you need. And so then the question is, how do you stop from getting burned up and get what you need? And the answer to that is that you mold yourself into the hero. And that's a religious story. And you must say, well, is it true? And the answer to that is, it depends on what you mean by true. And, that's a weasel answer in some ways, but it's not. It's because it's such a deep question that it can't be put forth without discussing the definition of true. So it's as deep a question as what is true? Now, it could be that I would say that part of the cultural war is a criticism of the motif of the hero. That's Derrida's phallogocentrism. Western culture is phallogocentric. I would say human culture is phallogocentric. I think Derrida was wrong about that. It's human culture. It's man, so to speak, against nature. Although sometimes it's man against culture and sometimes it's man against man. It's man against nature, and we triumph as the hero. And maybe that story isn't true or isn't correct. But that's us. And if it isn't correct, well, then we're an evolutionary abortion, because that's who we are. And I would say, well, before you throw it aside, maybe you should try it. You don't have a better option anyways. And there are, what does it mean to try it? Mostly, I would say it means two things. It means to practice love. And that means assume that things are valuable and act according to that assumption. And it requires truth, which is don't say what you know to be untrue. And, when I tried to unpack the first sentence of Genesis, in the context of the broader biblical narrative, what appears to be happening is that there's a proposition that God is guided by love and uses truth to create. It's something like that. And maybe love is something like the wish that all being would flourish. There isn't a better story than that.
What effect do you hope your new book to have? I know that might seem like a lazy question, but I'm going to keep it broad. I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts. What would be success, a successful effect for this book, looking back 12 months from now, 24 months from now?
Well, it would be lovely if it had the same effect on people as the last book appeared to have. I mean, it's comforting to me to read through my YouTube comments. Oddly enough, because that isn't generally a place people would go for comfort. Untold numbers of people have said to me in person, but publicly in that way, that they've put their lives together, at least in some ways. And you talked about Viktor Frankl. When I wrote Maps of Meaning, I said, well, I was interested in malevolence. I was deeply affected by the accounts I'd read of what happened in the Second World War and in Germany, and what happened in Soviet Union and in China. These horror shows that characterized the 20th century. Constrained malevolence. And so if you study malevolence, you start to understand what the opposite of that is. The opposite of malevolence is something like the hero's journey. And it's easy to be cynical about that, but, well, it's not that easy, because if you're cynical about that, then you undermine your own life. And everyone knows this. This is the other thing that's so interesting. Everyone knows this. You never teach someone you love to lie. You're always appalled if you have a son or daughter. You're always appalled if they don't tell the truth. You know in the deepest part of your heart that if you don't tell the truth, the world falls apart. And that's actually true.
So the new book is Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. We'll flip that in the screen. Not to be offensive, thank you for sending it to me, but I personally like this one more than the first one. Are you hearing that a lot?
I'm hearing that more than I expected, and I'm happy about that. I mean, you hope that each thing you do is somewhat better than the last thing you did, if you're fortunate. And it wasn't obvious to me that I couldn't tell if it was the same quality, worse, better. I tried to make it better. And I would say that's the general response so far.
Yay! It's like Michael Jackson putting out Thriller and then putting out Thriller 2 and